We'll call the June 22nd, 2016 meeting of the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency to order. Director Nader, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Will the clerk please call roll?
Baker. Here. Hesh. Here. Holmes.
Here.
Nader.
Here.
Nesbitt.
Here.
Rohan.
Here.
Russlin. Here. Trebus. Euler.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of our last meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? The minutes, we have an abstention. All right. Thank you. Celia, we're on agenda review. Is there any update that you need to give me?
Yes, you have a couple of handouts in front of you. You have a letter that was emailed from Tink Miller that is pertinent to item J. And then you also have a booklet of Keep Placer Moving, which is also pertinent to item J.
All right, thank you. With that, then, we will move on to public comment. This is the time on our agenda for anyone who wishes to address this board on an item that is not on the agenda today. Does anyone wish to speak to an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and move on to item number F on our agenda is the consent calendar. We have 18 items, all of which are considered to be non-controversial, and it's proposed that they will be acted upon in one motion. Unless someone from the public or a director wants to remove an item for separate discussion. Does anyone wish to do so? None from the board, none from the public. Is there a motion to approve the consent?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. No? Abstain? Consent calendar is approved. We'll now adjourn the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency and convene as the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency. Item G on is our consent calendar, and there are 3 items considered routine and proposed for approval with one motion unless a director or a member of the public wants to remove an item. Does anyone wish to remove an item? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? The consent calendar is approved. We'll move on to item number 8 on our agenda. H, excuse me. This is the approval of the fiscal year 2016-2017 budget for the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency. We'll begin with the staff report.
Good morning, members of the board. I'll be handling this item. Attachment 1 provides a proposed operating budget for fiscal year 2016-17. The operating budget shows an increase in operating revenues by around 6.4%, or slightly over $100,000. And this is primarily as a result of an increase in prior year deferred revenue. The operating expenditures are proposed at $1.63 million, which is about a 2% increase from last year's budget. And as part of the operating expenditures, you'll notice on the table that there's a number of programs where funding decreases. That's offset with an increase in the operating reserve, as well as an increase in funding for short-range transit plan activities. The short-range transit plans, their horizon years are 2018, and so it takes about a year and a half to do the planning, and so we're proposing to set aside the funds now, primarily as a result of the deferred revenue that we show in the budget here to fund those particular planning activities. And with that, the proposed year-end surplus will be approximately $144,000, and that'll be carried over into fiscal year 17-18. And I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Before I open it up to the public, does any member of the board have a request or clarification from staff? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to open it to the public. Does anyone wish to address this item? Okay, we'll close public comment. If there is no discussion by the board, I'd ask for a motion to approve.
Move approval.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. No? Abstain? Okay, motion passes. We'll now adjourn as the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency and convene as the Placer County Local Transportation Authority. We're on item I of our agenda, and this is the adoption of bylaws. Let's begin with the staff report.
Yes, good morning, Chair Rohan, members of the board. This is the first meeting of the Placer County Local Transportation Authority. We've held this designation for about 10 years, but have never exercised it, as this is a designation that is specifically for the purposes of a transportation sales tax, which you'll be considering an ordinance on as your next item. But in this first meeting as the PCLTA, so we have yet another acronym, we need to adopt bylaws to determine how we operate. These essentially are very similar to the bylaws of PCTPA. The one difference is that PCTPA does not have in our bylaws the ability or the to adopt an ordinance, and so this is laid out in the bylaws in terms of how to adopt an ordinance. And I would like to also introduce Jen Gore, who is our attorney. And so if there are any legal questions on this or the next item, she'll be helping me out. So with that, I want to mention that these have been reviewed by Jen, and we are recommending those for approval.
All right. Directors, before I open it up to the public, do you have any requests or clarification from staff? Seeing none, I'd like to open this item for public discussion. Anyone wish to address the board on this item before we take action? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. If there's no additional board discussion, I would ask for a motion to approve the bylaws. Okay.
Second.
We have a motion to second. All those in favor say, oh, you want a roll call on this?
Yes.
All right, roll call.
Baker.
Yes.
Hesh.
Yes.
Holmes.
Yes.
Nader.
Yes.
Nesbitt.
Aye.
Rohan.
Yes.
Westland.
Yes.
Trebus.
Yes.
Euler.
All right. Our bylaws are adopted. We'll move on to item number J. This is a public hearing on our Transportation Improvement Plan and Retail Transactions and Use Tax Ordinance. There's going to be 3 steps involved in this item. The actions requested include, first, conducting a public hearing on the Transportation Improvement Plan and Retail Transactions and Use Tax Ordinance. Following the close of that public hearing, we will then, as a board, consider the adoption of the Ordinance 16-2, adopting the Transportation Improvement Plan and Retail Transaction and Use Tax Ordinance, as it's shown in our attachment number 1 in our agenda packet. And then by separate action, we will then consider adoption of Resolution 1603, requesting the Placer County Board of Supervisors to call an election to obtain voter approval of the Transportation Improvement Plan and Retail Transactions and Use Tax Ordinance on the November 8th, 2016 ballot. So let's begin with the staff report.
Yes, and I appreciate your patience and indulgence, because I know many of you have seen this presentation many times, and feel free to join me at any point in explaining things. But Chair Rohan felt it was important that as we are considering this major step, that the public who may see this tape and also those in the audience may not be as familiar with this information, and making it very clear in terms of where we have been and where we are recommending that we go. So this may look familiar to you. Since at least 1999, we have been trying to figure out how to even up the debits and the credits in terms of the transportation world. And we have taken a look at a lot of different mechanisms over that time, including a transportation sales tax. And we've been, I think, very creative and resilient in trying to figure out how to deal with our transportation needs. We've been aggressive about developer impact fees. We've gotten discretionary bond money and federal earmarks. And as much as we've chipped away at the transportation needs, they've been piling up because we simply don't have the money to deal with them all. And all of those ways that I mentioned that we've cobbled together money in the past have really run dry, and the situation becomes even more desperate. So over the course of the last several years, and this slide shows you what we've been doing the last 3 years in terms of a work program, we've been out there trying to make a focused effort on dealing with our transportation needs and figuring out how to fund them. And as the result of all of those town hall meetings and mailers and presentations to every Rotary Club and community group and every elected official and municipal advisory committee, we've really made a strong effort to be everywhere, and including on the internet. And the result of all that is the ordinance and the expenditure plan, or transportation improvement plan, that you see before you this morning. So back in April, the board directed staff to start the process to put a transportation sales tax ordinance on the ballot. And the first step in that was to get the approval of the draft expenditure plan, which is also the transportation investment plan. I have to get my terminology right. To get the approval of that, we needed a majority of the jurisdictions and representing a majority of the incorporated population, as well as the Board of Supervisors, in order to move forward with the consideration of the ordinance this morning. This has occurred. The first meeting that we had with the jurisdictions was back on May 10th. The last was just yesterday with the Board of Supervisors. I'm pleased to say that we received unanimous approval from all of the jurisdictions. In fact, of the 35 elected officials that considered this, we only received one no vote. So all but one of those were unanimous votes. So it really illustrates the strong support out there. So the next step, of course, before you this morning is to consider adoption of the sales tax ordinance for the ballot. And should the board do that, it would then be forwarded to the County Board of Supervisors for the action to place it on the ballot. But first, for the benefit of those who might be haven't seen this information before, and there may actually be a couple of people in this county that haven't, let me give you a little bit of background, and I'm going to go through this quickly as to not try your patience too much. Placer is growing. It's a desirable place to live and to work, and a lot of people want to be here and do that, and there's a lot of economic impacts and jobs that go along with it that we need to deal with. But the fact is that all of that growth and that economic development means more people need to get around, more businesses need to get around, and transportation is absolutely pivotal to our quality of life and our economic vitality. And we're seeing increasing gridlock out there, and a prime example is on I-80 at the 8065 interchange right now. Well, actually, when we did this calculation last year, if you were at the Sacramento-Placer County line going eastbound on I-80, going through the 8065 interchange, going north to Blue Oaks, it would take an average of about 9 minutes. By 2023, in a mere 7 years, that's going to take 35 minutes. If we can implement the improvements that we need to do on that interchange and on 65, that will go down to 7 minutes. And it's not just the traffic backups that we're seeing, it's also pavement and roadway conditions. They are becoming worse and worse. Our pavement condition index, which is the measure of how good your pavement is, you want that to be 85 or above. That means your pavement is in good shape. What we're seeing is the countywide average is now 69, and I think it's even that high largely because some of the new development has not, those roads, the more recently put in roads are still in decent shape, but what we're seeing in the unincorporated area, that pavement condition index has gone down to 62, and in Colfax, it's 40, which is pretty close to crumbling. And I'm sure Board Member Hesch can go into great detail about what they're seeing in Colfax. And it's not just the roads, it's also the bridges. About 15% of the county's bridges need repair, and about 30% of them need replacement, which I think is kind of scary as you're driving out there over culverts in those rural areas. So, as the board is well aware, we've been doing a lot of work to try and keep up with our needs. We've been very successful in leveraging what money is out there, but we've used all of our current and future dollars to do that, and we really don't have the funds going forward. And we've got some great plans. We just simply don't have the money. The gas tax, as the board is painfully aware, doesn't do it. The gas tax was last raised in the early 90s. It's 18 cents for the state, 18.4 cents federal. That has not been raised since the 90s. It is not indexed for inflation, and it is not a percentage of the cost of gas. It's a flat dollar amount, and so the buying power of that gas tax is about a third of what it was back in the 90s. And at the same time, you've got vehicles that are far more fuel efficient, that are punishing the roads. You've got vehicles that don't even use gas, electric vehicles, hydrogen vehicles, that are all still using the roads, and so it becomes a diminishing revenue source. The feds just passed a new federal bill, the FAST Act, and it is a 6-year bill, but it does not have enough money to actually fund it for the whole 6 years. So at some point, they're going to have to go back to the general fund yet again. So it's another illustration about the underfunding of transportation, and that was just to keep things status quo. That was not to try and improve transportation any. And at the state level, I think it's even worse because not only does the state not have any money, they've made it very clear that they are not interested in any kind of road expansion. Certainly the Brown administration has made that very clear. I think the phrase I heard from the Assembly Transportation Chair was, "not one more lane mile." And that's not something that this board has expressed support for, to put it mildly. The board is very well aware of the developer impact fees that we've put in place. We've been very aggressive about those and really maxed those out, because the other side of developer impact fees is they can't pay for existing problems. You can't assess new development for problems that are already here, and you can't assess them for road maintenance. So that is a limited funding source. So what a lot of counties, going back to the early 80s, have done is to take charge of their local transportation by passing local option transportation sales taxes. Those cover about 85% of the population of the state. I believe there are 20 counties, and Placer is amongst the largest that does not have that source. So we've got a big hole that we need to plug. And as you know, we have looked at a lot of different ways to plug this hole. We've looked at high occupancy toll lanes. I can go into detail on that, but I know you've heard it before. We have looked at toll roads for the Placer Parkway. It doesn't pencil out. We've looked at legislative changes that allow us more flexibility on what dollars they're out there, and tried to put our finger on the scale to try and get what discretionary money there is towards projects that we want to do. But sadly, that has not really gone very far. We haven't been very effective in that. And what we're seeing is a governor and a legislature that are actually putting more silos in there for projects that they think are a priority that are not necessarily a priority here in Placer. So now we're looking at a transportation sales tax like so many other counties have done. And I want to add, why a sales tax? First of all, it's proven very effective in other counties. And in fact, one of the interesting things that the state has done is that they have favored counties that are self-help, have a transportation sales tax in discretionary funding allocations. So that gives you a plus, a seat at the table. We've also looked at other tax options. We've looked at a local gas tax that's just Placer County only. And when we looked at that several years ago, we pretty much discarded it quickly because it would be at least 50 cents a gallon. It's, again, a declining revenue source like we've seen with the other gas taxes, and it would need special legislation. But also, if it's only Placer County, if gas is 50 cents a gallon more in Placer County, people are going to go to Citrus Heights. They're going to go to Nevada County. They're going to avoid buying gas here. So it really is not going to be effective. We also looked at a property tax, but one of the challenges with that is that only locals would pay for our transportation system. And the fact is, people from all over the state, all over the country are using our transportation system. I-80, as you well know, is a national route. It's the only all-weather crossing of the Sierras for 1,000 miles. And with a sales tax, about a third of the revenue comes from visitors and out-of-county residents who come here to shop. And I also want to mention the cost per family, not per person, but per family, is estimated at between $61 and $63 per year. So now let's get into what is actually in front of you this morning. And this is the transportation sales tax ordinance would be to impose a 0.5% transportation sales tax for 30 years, generates about $1.6 billion, and then there is a specific transportation investment plan or expenditure plan that specifies the projects and the distribution of funds. And there was concern about the legalese in an ordinance. And so we did produce a booklet that is part of what you are considering today. It's in your agenda, of course, but this is a little bit nicer version that is in more user-friendly, more reader-friendly format to make it more understandable to the average voter and citizen what is the question in front of them. So, some key provisions of the ordinance are an independent citizen oversight committee. The membership would be 8 members, one appointee from each jurisdiction, so each of the cities and town would appoint a person to be on the oversight committee. The Board of Supervisors would have 2 appointees, and one of those appointees needs to be from the Tahoe area. And these appointees could not be elected officials or employees of the jurisdiction. And this committee would review the annual audits, receive reports on the expenditures, and then publish a report on the findings on an annual basis so that the public would know what's going on and the findings of this oversight committee. The ordinance does allow for bond financing. There is a stated preference for pay-as-you-go, but it does allow us to fund some projects that need to be done earlier with bond financing. And the expenditure plan itself outlines the eligibility of projects for funding. There's bicycle and pedestrian and neighborhood electric vehicles, and the competitive program are specified to have their criteria and process established in the first year should the sales tax pass at the ballot. And it does state, though, that safety, connectivity, ability to attract matching funds, and lack of other funds should be some of those criteria. There is a requirement that there is a rural road maintenance and repair fund that specifies that at least half of the county's share of the local transportation fund has to go for the maintenance of rural roads, and it specifies the 10 max within which those need to be spent. But quite honestly, in the expenditure, the suggestion, what the county has expressed their interest in using their first 5 years of funds for, it's virtually 100% would go to the rural road maintenance. So that is not a bar that is tough to achieve. And then there is a requirement for a maintenance of effort, that the money that goes to the jurisdictions for the local transportation programs are additive funds, not replacement of funds that are already being used. So there is that requirement. The ordinance requires a 2/3 majority vote for passage, and that would be on the ballot in November. There is a cap of 1% on overhead and administration. And this is for transparency, to operate the Independent Citizen Oversight Committee, to have the audits done, and so on. And I do want to mention this is a maximum amount. And I want to use the example that PCTPA has managed the SPARTA, the South Placer Regional Transportation Authority, since 2002. And that impact fee program has a maximum for administration of $150,000 a year, and the average that we have spent annually over that period of time is about 1/3 less than that maximum. So I just want to point that out. We don't know the exact costs. There are more costs involved in terms of transportation sales tax, but we have a good track record there. And I also want to note that the ordinance requires that funds have to be spent as promised. This is an ordinance. If it is passed by the voters, it becomes a law. It can't be changed or rated by the state or any of the other, or the money diverted for anything other than what is in the expenditure plan/investment plan. So let's talk about that. This is the layout, the overview of how the funds would be spent. And I know you've seen this all before, but let me go into a little bit more detail. The 8065 interchange is probably the biggest and the most talked about project in all of this. It's certainly the project that I get the most comments about, and I'm going to guess that many of you have had the same experience. This would reconfigure the interchange at a collector-distributor system and direct freeway-to-freeway ramps, and widen the viaduct section on Highway 65 to eliminate the bottlenecking that is occurring right now at the loop. Ultimately, that loop will be eliminated, but this will be done in phases. Should we receive the funding to go forward, we could start construction on this next year on that first phase. Highway 65 widening is part of this. This would widen all the way from the end of the 8065 project all the way to Lincoln, and depending on what section of Highway 65, it would be anywhere from 6 lanes to 10 lanes. This includes a mixed flow lane, auxiliary lanes, and the potential for future carpool lanes. This is mostly funded by developer impact fees, but as the board is well aware, there's kind of a chicken and the egg issue with developer impact fees because they are paid at the time of the building permits being pulled, and so you have the growth that is happening and you save up that money and then do the improvements. Well, traffic gets worse and worse and worse while you're saving up, and so the sales tax also provides the opportunity for a financing mechanism that would allow us to make some of those improvements and then get paid back through those developer impact fees. And that's also the case with the Placer Parkway, which is a new road connecting Highway 65 to Highway 7099. It's 95% developer impact fee funded, but this is a key growth area for economic development. There are 2 universities being proposed for out in that area. Lots of jobs, lots of housing, lots of economic activity. That access is going to be needed, and this could certainly jumpstart that. Okay. Okay, here we go. Okay, Highway 49 is also part of this, and we have also worked with Caltrans and can leverage dollars. They are looking to do some improvements on Highway 49 between I-80 and Dry Creek, and by joining in with some funds, we can expand that to add bike lanes, sidewalks, landscaping, synchronizing the signals, as well as widening the roads and making this a much safer area. There have been, certainly tragic accidents recently in terms of pedestrians along this route. So this would be both a safety and operational improvement. Widening Baseline Road, again, this is about 85% developer impact fee funded, that we can jumpstart this project. This is one of the projects that really rose to the top as a result of town hall meetings and responses on the internet, emails. People want this to happen sooner rather than later, and by this would then be part of the expenditure plan. I-80 auxiliary lanes, adding a fifth lane westbound at Douglas, and eliminating one of the merge movements at eastbound at Rockland Road. Interchange improvements at 4 different areas, again, for those who might be seeing this on tape. There really is traffic on I-80. Google Maps does not necessarily recognize it, so as you're looking at some of these areas, please know that all the cars have not gone away, but the improvements would then be included in the expenditure plan. Capital Corridor, adding a 3rd track between Roseville and Sacramento, brings us to 10 round trips a day and makes that a really viable commuter as well as recreational and excursion opportunity for Placer residents, actually bringing people into Placer as much as taking them to Sacramento and the Bay Area. Enhancing dial-a-ride service, commuter bus services. We have an aging population. There is more and more demand for our dial-a-ride services, and being able to meet that both now and in the future is really critical. And expanding our very successful commuter bus services to more areas. Every person that's on a commuter bus is a person that is not on 65 or not on 80. So that is also not only a convenience, but a congestion management tool. And then, as I mentioned, 30% of the money goes to the jurisdictions by formula. It's about $480 million all told. The formula does have a minimum of $250,000 a year, and that really only applies to Colfax at this point under this formula. But that would be provided on an annual basis. Jurisdictions would be required to submit a capital improvement program of what they're going to spend the money on for the next 5 years. There's a lot of flexibility as long as that money is spent for transportation purposes, but clearly what we're hearing from all the jurisdictions is it's road maintenance, it's filling those potholes. It can also be used for matching funds for grant programs, which is an issue that is a challenge, for example, for the county in terms of matching funds for some federal bridge money to deal with those 30% of bridges that need replacement. So there's a flexibility there as long as the money is being spent for transportation. It is up to the jurisdictions to decide how to spend the money, and then on an annual basis, that capital improvement program is updated, and a report on how you spent the money in the past year, and that would then be reviewed by the advisory committee to make sure that everything is being done for transportation purposes. There is a set-aside of 3% of the funds that go to the Tahoe area, and I hear from the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association that they recently did some polling as of yesterday, and there was 72% support for making improvements to the Tahoe area, including trails, including road maintenance, including transit enhancements. Tahoe is a unique area, and so that's why they have a unique set aside in this program. There's also just under 5% of the funds that go for bicycle and pedestrian and neighborhood electric vehicles and safe routes to school and those enhancements, and that would be on a competitive basis with criteria established, as well as a competitive projects program. And this is because, as you've heard me say many times, I am not psychic. And this is a 30-year program, and things are going to happen in the next 30 years that we don't anticipate. And so this allows us some flexibility to deal with those needs, whether that might be infrastructure for self-driving vehicles, new technologies, matching funds for programs that don't exist now. But ultimately, if those funds are not expended over the next 30 years, those would go back into the pot for distribution to the jurisdictions for potholes and the like. And then, of course, there is the 1% maximum that goes to transparency, accountability, administration, administering the Independent Citizen Committee, and having the annual audits and reports and so on. We are now at June 22nd. We have been through the direction to move towards placement on the ballot. We have been to all of the jurisdictions and gotten concurrence on the expenditure plan. So it is now before the board to determine whether to adopt the transportation investment plan and retail transactions and use tax ordinance. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Board members, is there any final clarification? Yes, Keith.
Yeah, a couple things, Celia. That's a pretty good microphone. One of the things you talked about was the bonding, and so I think people are going to look at, you're taxing us, and then you're bonding, and you're going to pay interest on those bonds. So describe what kind of actuarial analysis you'll bring, at what level you'll bring that analysis to the boards and the people to describe how you're actually saving money by paying that interest.
Well, certainly, as you're looking at bonding, you get the best interest rates you can, and certainly transportation sales taxes have a good track record of because it's a stable funding source that you can get the best interest rates. We would be very judicious about bonding. We would not over bond just for the pieces of the program that need to happen soonest. And what you have, especially now, is we're seeing the costs of infrastructure going up very significantly. And so if you can build now, you're locking in today's costs versus future costs. And what you certainly aim to do is to have an interest rate that is lower than the escalation rate in terms of your construction costs.
Correct, and I understand. I guess my question is, are you going to have sort of a synopsis of that you would bring to the agencies, to the people, who explain to them how the future dollars really would be more expensive than paying the interest? I guess that's what vehicle will you use to bring to the people or to the boards to understand the bonding?
Well,
they understand the cost-benefit analysis.
That's exactly what I would be bringing to the board to determine whether you want to. The bonding is going to be determined by this board.
Correct.
And that is part of that analysis, that you will decide whether it's a good idea to bond. But I can make you a promise I'm not going to bring you a bad deal.
I understand that, and I appreciate it. The other thing, so describe how you talked about the maintenance effort with the local roads and stuff. So how's that going to be established? Because in a city like Auburn, during the downturn, we really cut back on road maintenance. We have a good year. We spend an extra $200,000. How do you establish that benchmark that makes you happy on that maintenance effort? How is that going to be established?
It is in the ordinance, and let me find the page. On the it's, I believe, give me a minute here. The maintenance of effort, I think it's on page, okay. It is on the bottom of page 128 of your agenda and goes into the next page, and it is in that, because we did go round and round with the jurisdictions on this, and that was an issue that the public works director, as well as the city attorney for Auburn, did bring up.
And like I said, that's because in an off year that we could take this 580 or whatever, still have a road maintenance program and maybe not contribute as much as we normally would. On the other hand, there would be years where, if we have really good years, we would actually put more into the program. So I guess the benchmark and how you actually establish those benchmarks was the question.
Yeah, and it is no less than the average percentage of general fund budget spent for local street improvements for the 5 years prior.
Yeah. Okay. So you would be subjective on that?
I think that's an actual calculation.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? All right. I'd like to open it up to the public. Does anyone from the public wish to address this body? Would you please state your name for the record?
Good morning. My name is Jamie Wright, and I am the Executive Director for the Truckee North Tahoe Transportation Management Association, and I'm really just here to advocate for putting this onto the ballot in November. We happen to be in Placer County, one of the largest counties in the state of California that do not have a self-help sales tax. For the Tahoe Basin in particular, this would truly benefit us and help us overcome sometimes the quadrupling of people in our region. So encourage you to really consider it, and I think this will help us educate the public on the importance of mobility overall in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to address us?
Well, I submitted the form. I was waiting for you.
Would you please come to the podium and provide your name, please?
Yes, I'm Michael Garabedian, speaking for the Placer Group Sierra Club, and I think nearly all of you, maybe all of you, have heard our talks at the cities and at the county yesterday. And I think you've seen the letter and you've seen the handout we have on induced traffic. So I don't know that there's any point in going into those again. I think you understand our concerns. So I'm going to talk about 4 things here briefly. Intermodal, as I understand it, how not to build highway, how to successfully build highway, and how to be bold with transit. First of all, intermodal, this is from my own experience. I spent my first 5 years in the Mission District, then we moved to the Upper Haight. And I could walk 1 block down to get to 33 at Clayton. I could walk 2.5 blocks up to get to 43 that went out in the avenues. I could walk 1 block down to get to 6 Masonic, went down, and I could walk a couple blocks further to get to the express buses on Haight Street, and then I could walk a couple blocks over to the N. Judah Tunnel and get right downtown, and several of those ways I could get to the East Bay Terminal and catch the electric train across the bottom level of the Bay Bridge. So that's what I think of as intermodal, and that's the kind of bold the Sierra Club's looking for here. Also from my experience, about how not to build highway. The Panhandle Freeway was proposed along Oak and Phelps Streets through the Panhandle, corner of the Golden Gate Park, and out Funston to the Golden Gate Bridge. Now, my dad organized in that right away, using proper techniques to do a population survey, which discovered many minority people, and that survey was what changed the vote of the civil rights leader on the board to a no vote. They'd had a couple of positive votes, and finally the supervisors turned it down. When I went to your first meeting, the first time I was exposed to this was last May at the Board of Supervisors presentation, and I'm going to get to this in a minute, and I saw a payson there because I had a job to build highway at one point. So I've just talked about how not to build a highway is the kind of confrontational stuff there. You've done your homework. You have this is a sophisticated program with terrific staff work. So I was the coordinator for Roseanne Vuitch in her campaign. She became the first woman state senator in 1976. I was her coordinator in Fresno. And the reason she ran in Fresno, she also had margins of victory in Tulare and Kings County and a part of Kern, was the ad that ran called the Road to Nowhere. This was Freeway 41. And she got elected to build that freeway by her people. So I was her staff person in Sacramento for her first 5 years, and that was my job, to get Freeway 41 built. I arranged her first meeting with Adriana Gianturco, who Jerry Brown had brought on board as the director of State Caltrans, DOT, I guess it was called at the time. I was there at that first meeting when she told Gianturco she's there to get Freeway 41 built, and she's determined to do it. Now, there were a lot of ins and outs of that, and I see what you're doing here to get that built. I don't want to go into those, but the key thing, the thing that made the difference that I think is important to recognize here, is Roseanne made a decision to focus on 41. The downtown folks, everybody, they wanted the triangulation and other improvements. She said, all I want is 41. And when that is what broke the ice, got the support of the State Transportation Commission, along with the other things. And as I'll get to here, I think you're asking for too much. Now, I don't blame you for wanting to do everything. Can't fault you for that. And so that was approximately 1976 she was elected, and 4 years later, as was referred, the first efforts, I think the first effort I know, it was before I left California to go to New York, was the Wilshire Corridor half-cent sales tax to support that transit in the LA corridor. And that has a long history since then, but that is the kind of bold effort that the Sierra Club in its letter is hoping would happen as part of the development here, because this is the time to do that. Concerned that if this half-cent sales tax goes in, it'll be that much harder in the future to get the support for the kind of transit that's needed. So that's really the key point here about that. The difference between winding down highway, tearing them down in some rare places, and figuring out how to institute and get transit going. Like I say, I can understand you're wanting to do everything, but it's overdone. The Sierra Club has not taken a position on this. I don't know what they're going to do, if they're going to go through the process. It's not something that the Sierra Club opposed. I remember on Highway 41, I contacted the Sierra Club. They didn't oppose the Highway 41 because the right-of-way was already cleared. It was lying there stagnant. And the assemblyman running for it had introduced a non-binding resolution to get the thing built, and that was opened him up to losing that race. But now is the time to be bold on transit, and if the Sierra Club didn't take a position, one of the options we've looked at is a quarter-cent sales tax to deal with the critical need for local road improvements and transit with some improvement. But I don't know what's going to happen next. We'll wait and see what is actually going to go on the ballot before they decide. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Does anyone else wish to speak? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. We're now on the second step of our proposed action today. It's now time for board discussion and action on the proposal to adopt Ordinance 16-2. This is the Transportation Improvement Plan and Retail Transaction and Use Tax Ordinance. Is there board discussion?
Move approval.
All right. All right, we have a motion and a second. This is a roll call then?
Baker.
Yes.
Hesh.
Yes.
Holmes.
Yes.
Nader.
Yes.
Nesbitt.
Yes, and I'd like some discussion.
Rohan.
Yes.
Reslin.
Yes.
Trebus.
Yes.
Euler.
Director Nesbitt wants discussion.
I'm sorry.
Director Nesbitt asked for.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It was more about comments. I felt like the board should be making some comments and kind of giving their thoughts on this before we voted, but we we've still got the third one to go, so I would like to make some comments if I may.
Certainly.
Yeah. You know, taxes, I don't think anybody likes paying taxes. Nobody enjoys taxes. And I believe we're overtaxed, and most agencies, I do not believe, spend those taxes in a prudent manner, so I can understand the opposition to any kind of sales tax. But this organization is one of the most efficient that I've ever been involved with. You know, just about every project we've undertaken has come in under budget, usually ahead of schedule. The savings have been put towards future projects. We've been able to get matching funds from other agencies because they recognize our efficiencies. So I really trust this agency to handle this sales tax if it does pass. And the fact that there's no diversions of funds should make everybody a little bit more comfortable with it. We have a track record that shows we're prudent, that we're physically responsible with the money, and that it'll be spent wisely. So I think it is time to put this on the ballot. Let people choose if they want to get home sooner. Let people choose if they want road maintenance to get back on schedule. Let the people choose if they want to expedite the congestion relief. Put it on the ballot, let the people choose. The other thing I would say is, when they decide, respect the decision.
Thank you, Keith. Are there any other comments?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'll go ahead. I guess as the one board member, I had it on, Jim.
I'm just watching your message.
Appreciate that. Thanks. As a one board member that's been, shall I say, cautiously optimistic about the chances of this thing passing, throughout that entire time, I've never once questioned the need. And while we have been debating this, we have heard a chorus of no's from people outside of the ranks of elected officials, people saying, no, we can't have a sales tax. What I have not heard a chorus of or a solo of is, what is the alternative? I have not heard anybody come forward with a viable alternative to us taking control of our destiny locally. The feds have failed us. The state has failed us. And absent anybody coming forward with a realistic plan for state and federal funding to pick up their obligation, which is almost half of what we're looking at funding through this sales tax, just in terms of our interstate and state highway new construction that is necessary, let alone what we should be getting in terms of other dollars vis-a-vis gas tax. Unless somebody comes up with a viable alternative, no isn't an answer. And so I have convinced myself over the past week or so that absent a viable alternative, this is the, while not perfect, the best alternative in front of us. And so I support putting it forward. I encourage folks to take it seriously. And I encourage those that still want to say no, there's still time to show us what your alternative is. So for those that are out there that still say no, that we shouldn't be moving forward with this, I welcome your solution, as this board has always welcomed other solutions.
Kirk, I would like to just echo my very strong support for your comments. Right on point. And also, Keith, I think your comments about giving people the opportunity to make choices is something that we owe our constituents throughout the county. Does anyone else wish to make comment? Yes, Tony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I resist taxes just like everyone else does. I just need to go on record to say that, because I never thought it'd be so much in favor of a tax initiative, and I am completely in favor of this. I look forward, and I don't think we've talked enough about the air quality control improvements that this county will achieve by traffic moving, not just standing still. It's amazing to me that some people who, on the one hand, claim they're environmentalists, oppose traffic moving. They want it to stand there and sit there and be in log jams all day long. spewing the fumes into our air that we breathe. We need to talk more about that and get some numbers on it too, because we're gonna succeed at this. That's all I have. Very much in favor. Also enjoyed all the comments.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments? Yes, Diana.
I just want to, for the record as well, I am in support of this measure. Again, you know, to take control of our own destiny. Placer County has always done that, and we've achieved a lot doing that. Paving the way, exhausting every possibility in front of us, and still moving forward. And I think we're at that point right now. And I want to echo, I'm in agreement with Kurt's comments, and everyone on this board. And I have total faith in the agency. And again, you know, let's let the county decide. And I believe once they really take a good look at it, they will decide what type of quality of life they want, and they'll make that decision.
Thank you, Diana. Are there any other comments? All right, we have a motion and a second, and this is a roll call.
We've already taken the roll call.
All right, it's a roll call. All right, okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, we are on the third step then, and this is now time for board discussion and action on the proposal to adopt Ordinance 1603, requesting the Placer County Board of Supervisors to call an election to obtain voter approval of the Transportation Improvement Plan and Retail Transaction and Use Tax Ordinance.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. This is a roll call.
Baker.
Yes.
Hesh.
Yes.
Holmes.
Yes.
Nader.
Yes.
Nesbitt.
Aye.
Rohan.
Yes.
Russlin. Trebus.
Yes.
Euler.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Thank you. We'll now adjourn as the Placer County Local Transportation Authority and convene as the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. And item K is the Executive Director's Report.
I just wanted to clarify in the wake of the board's action just now what the agency's role is moving forward on the transportation sales tax. Of course, we'll be going to the Board of Supervisors for the actual placement of the measure on the ballot, and that is scheduled for July the 12th. And then essentially, our official role is simply for education purposes. I think that certainly the booklet that that we've produced, which explains the ordinance, will be part of that simply educational effort. We'll probably be doing the same presentation of the facts and what the ordinance is and what it isn't, and as we move forward. But in terms of any advocacy, anything like that, we would not be at all involved with that. That is something that I understand there is a campaign committee that has formed in advance of the board's actions, and they would be doing whatever campaigning they do. So I just wanted to clarify that both for the board and for the public. Our contract with FSB Core Strategies ends on June the 30th. So as in the very large list of things that you approved on the consent calendar for our contracts for next year, you'll notice that FSB is not amongst them. So they've been very, very helpful and effective in working with us in putting together this ordinance and investment plan, and I appreciate their efforts. So then it's really up to the campaign committee and the public from here on out. So I just wanted to provide that clarification.
Yes, Jim.
First of all, I want to thank staff for the tremendous job you did reaching out to the cities and everybody that was standing on a street corner. You did a great job. And I just want to be clear that as directors, we can go out and advocate for the transportation sales tax, correct?
That is absolutely correct.
Thank you.
All right. And so that concludes the report?
Yes, that concludes my
All
report.
right, then we'll move on to item L, and this is a direction to staff. Any other comments from the board? Yes, please.
just want to take this opportunity to address the board and staff. I will be, my family will be relocating to Georgia, and this is a promotion and relocation for my husband, and it's the same company that brought us to California, and it's turned out pretty darn good. So it's very bittersweet leaving. I have a tremendous amount of respect for this board, staff, just in a phenomenal agency. And, you know, being part of Placer County is something pretty special. Our cities, you know, we recognize the stronger we are together, the stronger as a county, and we've never lost sight of that. And so, again, very bittersweet, looking forward to it. My son is going in as a junior, so it's tough for him as well. But he has a great attitude. As a matter of fact, you know, he said to me, Mom, just so you know, Walking Dead is taped in Georgia. You might be able to be an extra if I have nothing to do. Not sure how I should have taken that, but I'm like, okay, new job, I guess. I'll be jobless. I don't know. But anyway, so anyway, it's a great, you know, it's a great opportunity. But I just wanted to really thank this board for your leadership and your friendship. So thank you.
Diana, thank you very much for your contributions. You'll be missed. Okay, item M is our informational items. If there isn't any discussion, I would ask for a motion to adjourn. Okay, there's a motion second. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.